Welcome to the Chatty Auties Show, featuring candid conversations around faith, church, culture, and neurodivergence. I am your host, Rebekah Josann, and this is my co-host, William O'Flaherty, the author of the Screwtape Letters Handbook. This show is presented by Scripture Prescriptions Ministries, a faith-based resource for spiritual growth, development, and health of the mind, body, and spirit. I am also the founder of Autism and Disability Advocacy Services, or ADAS, as a dual certified trauma-informed professional mental health coach and professional life coach through Light University, which is associated with the American Association of Christian Counselors of AACC.
Today we are talking about the origins of the term Aspergers and how it changed, and now it's called the Autism Spectrum Disorder. If you missed our very first launching episode, you can find it on this channel, and we will have them posted eventually on YouTube and other streaming platforms. The title is Meet the Chatty Auties Show.
But first, here is your scripture prescription to write on your heart to help you set your mind with intention. 1 Peter 2:2 in the NIV version says, "Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation." We chose this topic so early on because we wanted to set some foundations to autism and Asperger's, as you may have also heard, referred to for high functioning levels of autism. So we want to give you a little bit of background history on this person named Hans Asperger. Now, he was a scientist, correct? And he existed in the time frame of Hitler. Hans Asperger was born in 1906 to 1980, and he was the first to designate a group of children with distinct psychological characteristics. But he wasn't really a person that we look at as a positive role model. William, you want to share a little bit about what he was doing and why Asperger's was the name assigned to autistic individuals?
Well, yeah, so you already noted that he was born in 1906. From what we have, he got his medical degree in 1931, and then he was director of special education in Vienna in 1932. And then he became associated with the Nazis because even though he was not a registered member of the party itself, he did publicly support race hygiene politics, including forced sterilizations, and cooperated with with a child euthanasia program. Unfortunately, now despite his this problematic wartime record, he did resume his academic career after the war. But we do have a variety of things that he did in terms of experiments, and maybe you can remember more about some of the things that he did with children. I'll send it back to you on some of those highlights that you recall.
Yeah, so Asperger's was doing experimentation on multiple Jewish children, which is just horrific to even think about. He specifically was focusing on those who had mental deficiencies and disabilities, and he discovered enough information with these Jewish children, not saying that it's exclusively Jewish children that were autistic, but that is just who his sample data was at the time, right? And he was seeing them more animalistic rather than human. which is just wrong from a fundamental perspective. But it does make sense when you're coming from an evolutionary viewpoint. Just something to note that if you're seeing humans as, animalistic or animals or, coming from that type of a foundation and not as creations that are valued and loved by God, right? Then it's easy for you to devalue a human being that way. So I think that in his mindset, maybe with this, he was thinking that there was something very wrong and deficient with these children in their development to cast a shadow onto them about the psychosis of who they were, right? So one of the terminologies that he used was like psychopaths, which is just ugh. I mean, when you read about this story and you look at his history and just what he, you know, talked about and what he wrote, you really start to get that emotional response instantly, naturally. And yet this was so overlooked by so many people at the time. And what's even sadder about this is that he was praised by America and American leadership. He was praised for his study and his scientific research. And he was actually brought over to America to be one of the top scientists, which I mean, there's so much that could be said already just from that, right? Like here you have a man who is a Nazi. He supports everything that Hitler was about, right? In World War II. So in Germany, he is he's doing something he thinks that is the right thing to do. Like, studying all of this. I'll put a picture up of who this guy is. For those of you who are watching this on video, just to be seen by American leadership as a hero in advancement of psychoeducation and technology and medical advancement, and to target a people group like the Jewish children. That just is very, eesh. Like,
Mm.
and I think it reads when people really start to understand this of where this came from, when you see how our society in the educational research of autism um, is moving away from Asperger's as a phrase, it makes you not like want to use it anymore, you know? So what do you think about this personally, William, when you hear this? Because I don't know if you had heard of this story before we filmed today.
Right. Well, I had definitely heard some of it, but to where, when I became diagnosed just over a year ago,
Mm.
I was familiar with it. Oh, it used to be called that, but now it's called this. And so, in one sense, I can see, since those of us with less support needs, as we use the terminology at present here, while it's helpful in terms of level one versus the more support needs of level two and three, and people usually associate autism with the higher support needs. It's like having that different name. Have been waffling over it, where I would read some things online to where people say, well, when I was diagnosed, that's what it was called, so that's what I refer to it. I don't care if he was associated with the Nazis. He wasn't part of them, but he was complicit. He didn't, oh, he feared for his life. That's why he didn't. Well, but people do take a stance, so it definitely is more problematic to use that terminology. Now, in the future, if they decide to have something to distinguish, level one, because of the support needs are, in contrast to, say, like level three, vastly different, then, I would be in favor of that. But yeah, to call it, to use Asperger's, there is definitely concerns because of his, background, and because of the involvement of the things that he either did directly, or he was part of a larger group that did even worse things.
Yeah, and it's I understand, like, I think this is something important to understand. If you're not in like a medical field, like I know you're a counselor. Are you a therapist or just a counselor?
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. I'm not a licensed therapist, but in the type of work I did, I'm grandfathered in this more specific. But yeah,
Understood.
I do have a master's degree.
So you are familiar with the obviously the Diagnostic and
Right.
Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, right? The DSM and the
Hmm.
different versions that have come out. And each time they come out, there is more information in them. Or like they will actually take information out that they used to believe and put
Hmm.
something in based on what research that is showing. So with that and the diagnosis changes, um, I can hear a lot of mixed voices out there on this topic because some people are like, "Well, I know an autistic person and I don't think I see myself as autistic even though I just got diagnosed with it or I'm in the process of being diagnosed." Um and that is showing that divide, right? Because you've got your what they used to call high functioning. I don't know if they can still call it high functioning. Is that still
Some
considered?
will. Yeah, I mean, it's
Mhm.
generally most people say, "Oh, don't use that," but then less support needs, more support needs. It to me, it sort of says the same thing, but since something has been used so much and it becomes maybe associated in a negative thing. But
Right.
yeah, so high functioning is my understanding is that it's not it's not the favored terminology. It's favored to use the support needs versus the functioning.
Okay. And that's really helpful. And that's why I'm asking this because, I'm still learning in the process. We're all still learning, right? None of us
Hmm.
have all the answers. Even the medical fields and the science fields are saying that same thing. We don't have all the answers. We're still figuring it out. We're still, oh man, look at my shoulder. It's just like going all in and out of the camera all of a sudden.
Yes.
That's gotta look so weird on the video. I'm so sorry, people. Um, we need to improve this technology.
That's right. Yes.
So back to it. Yeah, the terminologies I think are huge because when we have these conversations about whether we should call ourselves Aspergers or call ourselves, high functioning autistic, right? The truth remains the same. We can get unity around the fact that we all are struggling with something with various support needs when we're diagnosed on the spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, or even if we're finding ourselves having to go with self diagnosis, which I do say is valid because it's what you're experiencing, sometimes more than what, the DSM 5 might tell you, right? Because there have been people who are misdiagnosed all the time with all different types of things, right? It's based on what we can gather. It's based on what we can offer in regards to um, the education that is out there that's presentable for us, right? So, with this topic, do you think that there is unity when it comes to the Asperger's versus saying
Uh,
autism?
well, yeah, no,
Is it
even
possible?
whether it's possible or not, yeah, hopefully it's possible theoretically, but yeah, there is. We were noting before we started recording that not that long ago I came across because there are several like Facebook groups that do use the terminology
Mm-hmm.
of Asperger's, and that there was one that was basically kind of ranting about, okay, yes, I know the background, yes, I know this, but this was what I was diagnosed with, and so I'm going to continue to use the term. Don't even waste your time trying to change my mind, and such. In fact, I did bring up, I have on my monitor just slightly above this
Okay.
computer here, where just in terms of more of a general thing, to where it's like with other words, we don't always have to have a clarifying term per se. But they used the example of like cancer, that if someone says that they have cancer, And of course, there's not as much direct parallel, but it just maybe a few moments here on this, and that, like, okay, we don't have to, usually someone doesn't necessarily say, okay, it's skin cancer, pancreatic cancer, or other some type of cancer, because in one sense, again, the parallels may be not that much of a strong link, but this person was saying that they just don't get why we need to differentiate. But so in terms of their example, as I'm thinking about it more, I'm not sure that that's maybe the best example. But because, again, with autism, there are the support needs. And so one of the things we haven't noted today here is that those with either the level 2 or level 3 might also have, just like it's possible with level 1, to have other conditions or syndromes that may have some association with autism, fairly or unfairly, probably more or less unfairly. And so, but yeah, it does provide a challenge, because if someone just is going to be disagreeable, I mean, it's okay to disagree, but let's not be disagreeable about it.
Right. And we'll go into more about that in our next segment after this short segment. 5 minutes, something that we pulled together and we think will be quite entertaining for those of you who are interested in what goes on inside of the autistic mind. So we are going to go ahead and break and go over to
Down the Rabbit Hole, where we take 5 minutes to talk about whatever pops into our head at random thoughts and challenge you to connect the dots that we connected in our own mind. So because in our heads, it just seemed to make perfectly good sense. Now, of course, being autistic, or at least I don't know, that I think that's probably why. In terms of doing something spontaneous, it's like we did kind of plan it out in terms of what we're talking about. And so I was fascinated by the fact, and it somewhat relates to with terminology, or the challenge when you're talking about autism. And what do you mean? It's like I saw a thing to where it's like, okay, we know what a parrot is like, or do we? And so I found an article that talks about 21 types of parrots. And so I want to set that up by noting what they said at the beginning. It says, to be considered a parrot, a bird must have a curved beak. Okay, we get that. And then I'm not sure I'm going to do justice to this word, but zygotic feet. Someone will correct me on that. But anyway, and so that's with 2 of its 4 toes facing away from them, and the other 2 facing away. That's what it says. And then the hooked beak is used like an extra foot or hand. And many parrots will use the beak to hold and manipulate items, and they will even grab branches to aid their balance. So that's what that is set up. And then it says there's 21 types of parrots. And so parrotlet is the first type. And then there's the lovebird. That is a parrot. And then there is a Brocky's parakeet. And then there's a single or Singal parrot. And then there's the well, let's see. I'm not going to read every single one here, but
you were doing a great job.
Yeah,
you were going there.
The 7th one is the parakeet. Now, for me, I just kind of, when I had thought about it one time a couple of years ago, oh yeah, there's a parrot and there's a parakeet. Okay, there's 2 types. No, there's at least 21, and I'm sure there's someone who have a list that's even more. But there's a Pontus parrot, which made me think of Pontius Pilate. So, what do you think about when you think about Pontius Pilate?
Oh my, Pontius Pilate. He was a dude that I think he was so close to the truth and understanding the truth. He was asking the questions to Jesus, because this is like so random, but it totally does connect. He was asking those questions to Jesus of like, what is truth? Who are you? And if he would have gone a little bit further and just really listened from his heart rather than look for, from his position of power, right? Mm-hmm. Then I think he would have definitely, gotten a little closer to that. And, it's funny because parrots, right? They repeat.
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
Parrots repeat. They repeat everything that they hear if they're a good parrot and they're operating as a
Yeah.
as a parrot,
As a parrot should.
as a healthy parrot. Um, so they repeat what they hear, and a lot of times I think when we hear things, we also kind of have that nature to repeat them. But there's also some flaws there too, because sometimes we
Mm.
repeat things that just aren't true. So, one of the things I really like is making sure that everything that is said in any platform, any space is truth, because we can get off track really, really fast with
Mm.
that. Isn't that the truth?
That is the truth. Yeah. I was going to say earlier when you talk about they repeat, but of course, if they have laryngitis that day, then they probably won't be repeating it. But
Probably not.
probably not. But yeah, and then I've got it's the less than 10. I don't know how much time we have left for our little
1 minute
segment here.
and 22 seconds. We have enough
Uh
time. Oh, can
oh
I tell you something? It just popped in my head. See, this is exactly how this works.
yes.
So I actually met a bird for the first time that I think was within this maybe parakeet family because it was repeating things all the time. And apparently its owner has passed away. But I must have reminded it of its owner in some way because it hopped right on my shoulder just like the original owner. It did that with its original owner, and it started whispering into my ear like
Oh my.
talking in my ear, and then it said, "I give you kisses. I give you kisses." And I started getting kissed by this parrot.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
Yeah. And the owner was like the owner who was still the surviving owner said they never do that. Like it never goes to any strangers like that. So that was such a neat experience. Um 22 seconds to say
Oh
what you want to
well.
say off of
I'd
that.
say that definitely wasn't a Quaker parrot, which is the because Quakers would be more conservative, which Quakers aren't Amish, but that would be a whole nother conversation altogether. But yeah, so that's just less than 10 different types of parrots here. And so maybe people can give us feedback about their knowledge about parrots.
Hey, good job. That was exactly 5 minutes. The timer just went off. So what I was showing you guys earlier was a timer. When I tried to put it up on the screen, it wasn't working
Either
because
disappears or
it
reflects.
disappears. Look, we're on a stage right now. We can do magic tricks.
Dun, da,
Like I
da.
can make my mic appear
Yeah, I
and
can make
disappear.
my head disappear,
Oh my goodness.
my shoulder disappearing
All right.
acts.
There you go. For those of you who are doing audio, you've got to get on QVision TV network so you can actually see our antics, and also YouTube where this is going to be. You can see it visually what we're doing. All right. So, all joking and fun aside, we need to wrap up this conversation. So, what would you say we as Christians can do in this situation when it comes to the division between Asperger's conversations and Asperger's terminology and those who are choosing to use the new DSM 5 or DSM, because this could be a different version by now, right? The DSM version of diagnosis.
Mm. Right. Yeah. I think the challenge is to it's okay to disagree, but let's not be disagreeable. Some people, if they were diagnosed many years ago, or if they're the place that they went to, they still use the term because they just weren't aware. But yeah, I think is if we can dialogue, be respectful of each other, and be open to other perspectives in terms of the information.
Yeah, and something else is really powerful is I always say compassion. Understanding, compassion, and empathy is something we need in this world. And we have lost it somewhere along the way to where we can even rationalize having an argument about this, I think. When I see the differences, like I've had conversations with some groups of people and different individuals where they felt offended that the word Asperger's was still being used. And I can understand that
Hmm.
from a human point of view, right? Because when you hear about the history of Hans Asperger's, and that is just there's some people in the world like Hitler that people are still talking about today. right?
Hmm.
Going just like that person didn't have a conscience. They couldn't have had a conscience to do what they did. And maybe that was a mental illness related thing. We don't fully know that. But when we think about like the compassion that is required to understand the positions that people are coming from, like I stopped using that word. I started striking it from every single thing that I had in my websites and stuff because I could tell how much it was hurting people's feelings. And even just that reason alone was why I struck it. I could
Hmm.
have chosen to continue to use it, but I try to, I wanted to educate people on why they're not using it any longer. And then people can make that decision for themselves. What do you think?
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a very good balance, because I think when you or when a person is more public in terms of like what we're doing, we're not like famous people, but when you're
We're not famous.
when you're though representing you know a group of people or a segment, then you want to be more responsible, in someone's personal life, in terms of if that were to be what they don't concern themselves, then but in terms of understanding the concerns that is out there regarding the term, but when you're one that's others are going to look towards for advice and direction, you want to be more careful about it. And so, individuals that, choose to, it's not as big of a deal, even though they hear and understand. Just, let's again be balanced, be respectful, and to, make sure that people, can learn and grow in the process.
So, yeah, the professional field. I'm glad you mentioned that because a lot of those who are listening to this Chatty Auties show are professionals in medical fields and in the higher level medical professional as well as science and things like that, right? And communication is everything when it comes to making sure that we are using language and terminology that respects this people group, right? It's easy to say, well, I'm just going to use whatever words I want to say, right? And it's too hard or it's just too much work, right? But when we're really thinking about the heart of a person and how that impacts that person or what type of even trauma that they've experienced in terminology, that's something that, is really important to think about. Have you come across that at all in any of your practices as a counselor?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that touches on a just a overall concept in terms of being a professional, to where there's on one side, which it can be viewed as negative, is that therapeutic distance, but then you also want to come across as being approachable, as well as being relatable. And
Mm-hmm.
so there doesn't necessarily have to be a tension between that, but you have to be mindful that you're not just two people sitting on the back porch talking about stuff and whatever. And so there's some, appropriate boundaries and things of that nature, as well as to, you know, be aware of, there could be a range of perspectives about something, but, keeping things focused in on what is the most commonly accepted, being open to the fact that there are possibilities for changes and adjustments based on the new information.
I'm glad you brought that up too. That's something that, we were talking about before the show is that um, we are going to come across this a lot, right? Because as new information hits and people are coming up with new understanding of autism, there is this whole wide open door of exploration and opportunity, which we'll have to talk more about in another episode. Of like how far is too much when it comes to exploration, right? Where's the extremes on that? Because
Hmm.
there's the extremes, and a lot of people and society is moving in extremes right now. And then there is that balance in the middle. And it's important to understand where those balance lines are. Where are those boundaries to exploration? Should we be open to ideas of new technology, new medical breakthroughs, and things that they're working on right now to help people who are on the autism spectrum. I've come across different articles and things that are talking about like breakthroughs in helping with executive functioning, and even products out there that are being developed with the science, that work with the science. And if we shut those doors, we are shutting also down the quality of life that we could have as autistic individuals, right? So I think maybe that's worth a discussion, in a future episode of where are those boundaries and lines. And then lastly, before we close, kind of touching back on, as Christians, how do we have these conversations that are really hard when it comes to online conversations, right? Because a lot of times it's easier for me and you to connect face to face. We're seeing expressions, we're seeing, all of that visual feedback. But when we're online and we're typing messages and our opinions, which we do have very strong opinions in the autistic community, right? We can end up hurting people with our words
Hmm.
unintentionally, missing tone, things like that. And that could possibly be another episode that we can talk about is communication. What are ways we can communicate better online? Um, but what have you seen in regards to that, like with communication online when it comes to these terminologies?
Right. Well, I mean, what comes to my mind in terms of communication is even when you are like we are now talking in
Mhm.
real time, video, even if we were just over the phone, um, times when we weren't recording, there was a example of where I said something in a funny way. I was commenting, but then you took it like maybe I was offended, and so that becomes a challenge in terms of when people have strong opinions and they are being mean. To where would you say that face to face? It's like there's even that challenge even when you are communicating in person, and
Mhm.
so that's all just to acknowledge communication, even when it is better face to face, and you might have some more reservations in
Mhm.
terms of not just kind of just blah, whatever is on your mind. But yeah, it just reminds us to stop and think, because many people, it's like they're just kind of like blah, 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 blah about their opinion. And they can not necessarily trying to be hurtful, but there are many people that do. And so it's very sad, especially even in the Christian groups that we're a part of, to where people don't stop and consider well, what they're saying, and would they want to be spoken to that way, or be read something that someone said in response to what they said.
It really goes back to Jesus' commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, right? Like we wouldn't
Hmm.
want to be talked to that way. We wouldn't want somebody to come at us a certain way, right? Or to even accuse us of something in the middle of our growth process, right? Because as you are newly diagnosed, you're seeing Asperger's everywhere, because that's what the terminology used to be. And as it morphs and changes and actually develops more online, right? In the SEO, the search engine optimization, where people are writing more articles and flooding out the Asperger's term, there's still articles out there that are talking with this older terms. So it's something to keep in mind as we are having conversations, right? With others, is that they might have done some searches online and they found old articles with old terminology, and then they're using that to help express themselves. Okay, so that was a fantastic conversation, I think. I hope this was really valuable to you. And I'm sure you have lots of other questions that are coming up. And in the future, I'm hoping to address those things so that we can have deeper conversations about what's on this Chatty Auties show. That's something for the future to be watching out for. But we do thank you for watching and listening to this episode. You can find us at our websites, RebekahJosann.com and EssentialCSLewis.com, where we have various different neurodivergent, multi talented, polypreneural like pursuits on those websites. You're definitely going to be entertained, that's for sure. You can also find us at Instagram at the Chatty Auties Show. It's super simple to find us there. We already discovered we've got all kinds of followers, and I haven't hardly posted anything yet because we're so baby new at this. So this is great. We have so many people interested. There's going to be a screen with all of these at the very end of this episode and in the show notes if you're listening on a different platform. And we also invite you to join our email list. This you also will find in a link in the show notes. And if you are watching this on QVision TV Network on the Healthy Living channel, you can hover over the QR code that you will see at the end with your camera to connect with us and receive emails for when these episodes drop. If you've never done this before, I'm just going to give you a quick introduction into how to do this because I don't know how tech savvy we are out there. But if you open up your camera app on your Android phone or your, what are the other phones now? Google Pixel, iPhone. You just open up your camera app and then you scan it over the screen when you see that QR code at the end. It's a round QR code, and then it will take you to a website which you will click on, and then you can make sure you sign up on our email list so you don't miss any episodes when we are dropping them. So I think that is all for today. So we thank you for joining us, and we hope that you have a blessed afternoon, morning, or evening.